Welcome to the Project Management Operating Room. This is a podcast where we talk about real project management problems that we source from different project management subreddits. We diagnose them and then we try to offer practical, real world solutions to them. Today we have three cases, and the first two are really interesting. Some of the more interesting that we've covered in the 5 show history of this program. The first one is Misdiagnosed Authority. And this is one where a new project manager is really struggling to mesh with the team on a pretty urgent project. And they have a lot of back and forth with the tech lead and the senior dev. And so they want to have a meeting with management where they're going to ask management to make these two developers this PM's direct reports. Case 2 today is called Agile Dysfunction. This is one where a project manager is really struggling to adapt to a new environment. It's an environment where the team works very informally. They have 80 different Slack chats, and they don't follow any Agile framework at all. And then case 3 today is Phantom Artifact Pain. This is a situation where a PM is frustrated because they spent all this time making this pretty Gantt chart, and they sent it out to the team via email. Team didn't respond. They had a meeting, and the team wasn't engaged during the meeting. So we're going to talk about that as well. So let's start with the first one, which is the Misdiagnosed Authority. This one is very long. This is about 2.5 pages. So I normally don't like to paraphrase because I think the context is important, but for the sake of time, I am going to have to do that here. But I'll start off by reading at least the first part of what this person wrote. I'm a new PM manager, came from a software engineering background, but I've also built and managed products in the past, some of them even my own. I joined this agency to take over a project that is now in week 9 of 16. The team is small, 1 tech lead, 3 devs, which is 1 senior and 2 mids, a QA, and me as PM. We all work remotely. The situation is classic, a messy project handover from the previous agency. Our job is to fix the existing system or rewrite it to cover the client's critical use cases and hopefully earn a project extension. The tech lead, working 5-10 hours a week on the project, and the senior dev joined first, about 2 weeks before everyone else. They came as a package from previous projects and they have tenure in the agency. I joined in week 3 and needed 2 weeks to properly onboard, so you could say they drove the project for roughly the first 4 weeks. The results were poor. The project I inherited was a collection of AI-generated GitHub issues spread across multiple GitHub repos, with work happening mainly on low-value priorities where critical issues were either not clear or ignored. Tech lead, senior dev aren't capable of managing other devs. All they can do is review some code and say a sentence or two in the daily stand-up. That's it. It's up to me to make sure our devs are working on what they should be working on. It's up to me to double check code scoped with task scope. It's up to me to even track dev hours to make sure they're not billing for anything that they shouldn't be. We also didn't migrate from the previous agency's infrastructure until around week 5, which meant we couldn't even identify the real bottlenecks until then. Real development only started after I've onboarded and started pushing very hard for proper project and testing tools. For the last 5 weeks, I've been trying to get the project under control, set up a proper Jira project, established daily team sync meetings, started running structured client meetings, managed the team, and even bought out of my own pocket and personally delivered hardware just to unblock devs instead of waiting for delivery from the client overseas. Since then, delivery has noticeably improved. The biggest challenge hasn't been the product itself, it's the leadership dynamic. My expectations when I joined were simple. As a PM, I expected to be able to decide what we build and when, while technical leadership advises me on how to implement it. Instead, I constantly feel like I'm fighting for ownership of the project. The 2 mid developers and QA have no issues with my structure. The problems are with the tech lead and senior developer. So then this PM goes on to highlight, categorize 3 sets of issues that I'm going to have to paraphrase for brevity. The first one is processes aren't being followed. This is one where they describe that the senior dev, kind of grabs these concepts, creates spike tickets, which are just tickets that are kind of offshoots from the sprint. And they, eventually get these issues merged into production. Then there's confusion where the QA doesn't know what to test, and so on and so forth. And then I'm going to read this PM's quote on this subject. I also have no visibility on how many hours he's working as he logs these hours in the system only on the last day of the month. not daily, how the rest of the team does it. And then they talk a little bit about the tech lead working on UI redesign that's not needed right now, so on and so forth. And then problem two that they highlighted is that the client communication is becoming messy. They explain in here that this PM invited the tech lead and senior dev to these meetings because they wanted to have the technical experts in the room. But now they think that the tech lead is dominating the meetings. They're bringing up things that have already been covered or that are architecture related, and it makes it harder to cover things that the PM thinks matters more. And then the third problem is leadership isn't clear. And I'm going to read a bunch of this because it's really core to what we're going to examine. Basically, it feels like I have all the responsibility, but not the authority. I've tried bringing this up in our leadership chat groups with the senior dev and the tech lead, but nothing is changing. I have experience driving much bigger projects successfully, and at this point, having to deal with these two on such a small project is becoming surreal. They keep telling me I'm the most responsible one here, but shouldn't freedom of decisions come from this as well? I have over 400 hours on this project. The tech lead has around 80 max. I'm carrying delivery responsibility, client communication, planning, prioritization, and day to day execution, but I'm still being second guessed on decisions by someone whose contribution has mostly been a redesign proposal that won't even be used until we get a project extension after 7 weeks. Tomorrow I have a leadership sync meeting. My plan is to raise these issues and call for a separate meeting with the tech lead, CEO, and COO. My proposal is to make the tech lead and senior dev my direct reports and that all information should flow through me. I also want to have separate meetings with the client one-on-one so we can go through priority things and move the technical leads to a separate meeting. All right. So, I mean, just wow, wow, wow. It's really just an interesting situation. There's so much there, and I feel like we could spend 45 minutes just breaking down this one because it is just so detailed and just so interesting. But let's try to consolidate here. So let's first. I want to first break down the problems that the PM highlighted. So the first one they highlighted was this lack of leadership clarity, and why is that happening? Well, I think there's a lack of leadership clarity because this PM has this belief that you can only lead with authority, and so they've tried leading with authority from their PM role by just telling these developers, "Hey, do it this way. It has to be my way," so on and so forth. That hasn't worked. So now they want to escalate it to the COO and CEO and say, hey, I need authority over these guys because they're not listening to me. Um, well, for one, that's going to go extremely poorly. And it's not going to look bad on those two devs. It's going to look badly on you as project manager that you're not a effective leader within your role and you can't work collaboratively with people. That's the key thing here is collaboration. So, this PM seems to think, hey, I was a developer, now I'm a PM, so now I control everything. That's not the role. That's not how it works. Um, this is a role where you have to influence. This is a role where you have to listen. This is a role where you take inputs, facilitate, etc. This isn't a role where you sit on top of the mountain and read off a decree that everybody follows. That's not it. The other big thing here with this mindset of authority is we also heard this expectation from this PM that, hey, when I became a PM, I thought I would be able to say what gets worked on when and what priority it is. Well, no, that's not true. The way it works is the product owner, and in this case, the product owner is probably the client. They decide what needs to be worked on. It's their project. It's their money, and they can tell you, hey, we want to see this first. This is what's important to us, especially in this kind of situation where we're like have 7 weeks left, and it sounds like we have some like pretty fractured product from a previous agency. So they should be telling you, hey, this is what we expect in the remaining 7 weeks. And then what happens is you take that to the team. The team says, okay, this is how we're going to execute it. These are the dependencies. This is how we need to sequence it technically. Then as a PM, you step in and you help facilitate and you map that out for them in whether that's project plan, sprints, whatever it is. But this whole concept of just, hey, I'm, king of the mountain here, and everything, I control everything. That's not reality. Problem two that this PM highlighted was that the client communication is becoming messy. Um, well, obviously, it's obviously very messy. And why is this happening? Well, one is that the strategy is really poor, and there's no internal alignment on what is happening here. So we heard about the fact that this PM invited these two devs into the meeting, and the one dev, the lead dev is taking over the meeting in this PM's account of events. And so they're saying that because that's happening, we're not covering what needs to be covered. Well, guess what? That the PM is to blame on a number of levels for this one. And first is there needs to be some internal alignment. If you brought these two developers into the meeting, first of all, expecting them to sit, to be like these silent mice that sit in the corner, that's not reality. These developers, most developers I've ever worked with, you bring them into client meetings, they're going to talk, and they're probably going to talk a good bit because they have the most technical understanding of everybody in that meeting. So they're going to have a lot to say, which is fine. That's reality. But where I was starting to go is this alignment piece. This PM needs to align with these developers before the meeting and say, hey, these are the outcomes that we're trying to get from this meeting. We need approval on this. We need clarity on this. We need prioritization on this. Instead, it's just, oh, they're taking over my meeting and they're covering stuff that shouldn't be covered. Well, that's because you're not laying out the groundwork. You're not laying out the goals for the meeting. It's just a free for all, and that's 100% on this PM. There's just a complete lack of structure and strategy around these meetings. Problem three that the PM highlighted is that their processes aren't being followed by the team. Why is the team not following the processes? Well, for me, it's very simple. They don't have respect for this PM. This PM has stated that, well, the team is, I have to track their time. Well, I've never heard of a PM tracking the team's time for them. Well, they're not honest about their hours. This one dev, he bills at the end of the month. That should be none of your concern. It should be absolutely none of your concern. That's a management issue. That's not your issue. Whoever they report to, that's their issue. I don't know why this PM is making it, their problem. It's not. And then the other thing is this micromanaging around, code reviews. Well, they're bad at code reviews. Well, then work with them. If you're an expert on code reviews, work with them. But that's not your role now. You were a dev in your past role. You're not a dev now. So, and then this whole thing of, the other reason they don't respect this PM is because, we had this situation where this PM comes in essentially in week 5. They said week 4, but if they onboarded in 3, as they said, and it took 2 weeks, to me that's 5, not 4. But either way, the team, these two developers are leading this project for 5 weeks, and this PM comes in and just wants to flip everything upside down, with the premise being, well, I'm the PM, you have to do what I say. That doesn't work. There's no attempt to do what we need to do as PMs, which is influence. Instead, it's just, this kind of come in, full force and just completely try and run these developers over, and then come back and complain that they're not doing what you say. They don't have respect for this PM. That's why this isn't working. That's why they're not doing what this PM thinks they should be doing. There was no attempt to collaborate with them, so they don't have any respect. And then for me, the biggest problem here is this project is seemingly behind schedule. We heard 2.5 pages worth of grievances about this team and these developers, and they can't do this and they can't do that and all this stuff. But what we didn't hear about is this is a 16-week project. There's 7 weeks left. The previous agency had some sounds like very incomplete work product that was transferred to this agency that's only been worked on for about 4 weeks since it came to them in week 5. And so we heard nothing about the fact that, we have 7 weeks left. We heard, well, we want an extension. What are you going to do to earn that extension? What are you going to do to earn the extension? There's no focus on that. So this PM is so worried about these rules and this authority and all this, stuff. But at the end of the day, where are the results? What are you doing in 7 weeks to earn this extension? What is the team doing to earn this extension? That's what it comes down to. What are your priorities? Well, it seems like the priority is to gain control over the team so they do what you say. The priority should be to make the client happy in 7 weeks. What do they need done and how are you going to do it done? And focus only on that. Instead, we're worried about silly rules and forcing people to do things a certain way. It's not the way. That's not the path for making this successful. Um, all right, so we've talked a lot about the problems. Let's get into how are we going to fix this, because that's really what this is about. How do we fix it? So first is what is our plan for these 7 weeks? So we need to work with the client. We need a firm list of priorities for these 7 weeks. And then we need to collaborate with the team and create a plan for accomplishing what this client needs in 7 weeks. It's really that simple. All this other stuff is just noise. It's simply noise. We need to stop worrying about who gets credit. We need to stop worrying about who does what. We need to work together. We need to find a way to work together to make this client happy in 7 weeks. That's the only thing that matters here. And to do that, that brings me to solution two, which is speaking with these developers respectfully and agreeing on processes by gathering consensus. And that last part is the most critical part, is this consensus. So this shouldn't be something where the PM says, "Oh, you guys are terrible at code reviews. You should be doing it this way." Or you guys don't have soft skills. You shouldn't be in client meetings because you don't have soft skills, and on and on. It's okay. Here's what I'm suggesting. Okay. And you have this in a team meeting with everyone, the entire team, not just these two senior and lead devs, with everyone. And you work together to come up with processes that will work as a team. That could be something as simple as, okay, the two devs are going to step out of the meetings for now, and we're going to just relay the information to them on my side as PM, and we're going to allow the team to focus on just the work. Or the devs join for the last 15 minutes of the meeting to cover technical things. That's one part of this process that could be agreed on. There's also other things, and I think the team should lead the process for deciding on code reviews and their coding standards, et cetera. That should be a team driven thing, not a PM driven thing. So I think the PM needs to step out of that stuff, let the team drive that process. But as far as the PM processes, that should also be collaborative, right? So if these stand-ups and whatever this, whatever your sprint cadence is, sounds like there's some degree of a sprint cadence since we heard about spikes. That should all be discussed. And I know, some people believe, oh no, you have to do it a certain way. I think that all needs to be done via collaboration, especially in a situation like this where there is a lot of consternation and pushback. Solution three, lead by example by showing the team that you can make their lives easier. This is the thing that I think people don't realize is when you come into a project late, okay, and this PM came in week 5 of a 16-week project. And so far for me, what I'm gathering is the team only sees this PM as making their lives harder and not easier, right? So that's the thing is how is this PM going to make their lives better? Well, making handling client communication, making sure priorities are clear, whatever it might be. Okay, helping with these JIRA processes. And it sounds like there was some effort to do that, but really showing them that hey, this is what we're trying to do to make things easier. But that's not happening right now, and it has to be done by example. And this example is by changing the attitude and the approach to being one that is more collaborative and less authoritative. It's really that simple. And then for the fourth solution, what I would do is stepping out of this code review micromanagement and encourage the team to own it. And that's kind of similar to what I was describing in solution two, but it really needs to happen is just get out of this micromanagement of, well, this code is bad and this code shouldn't be AI and this and that. I mean, if there's some policy that they can't use AI, which again is very uncommon in this age, especially when we're dealing with development work as we are here, just get out of it. The team should own that. If it's bad as this PM says it is, let the team own it. Let them decide. Okay, this is bad. We need to do it differently, or we need to structure it differently. Whatever it is, but you got to get out of that business. All right, so let's get into case two today, which is the Agile Dysfunction. All right, so I will read this one. I recently found myself on a multidisciplinary creative and technical project with around 100 staff. Somewhere before I joined, they decided they didn't really want meetings and wanted every feature to have its own designated chat with designer, programmer, UI, graphics, and PM. They'd scrap stand ups and reviews and now just have these small pockets of people working together in a chat where they are, quote, collaborating as small groups while being agile to resolve problems, end quote. This would be fine for a small project, but they have somewhere in the realm of 80 different features, so there's 80 chats. Some features go on for 2 weeks, but the majority are multiple months. Some staff members are in 15 chats. In these chats, they are talking about the features and almost designing them on the fly. Sometimes they share videos and updates. There's me and one other PM. This milestone, there are 26 different features I'm expected to track the progress of just via chats. I'm then expected to present all this work to the creative director each month. There's about 60 total staff I have to speak to. The team doesn't have their Jira updated, and I have to message them individually to get updates and try to unpack what they're doing. When asking in the feature chats, they all post, quote, no updates, end quote. And they're constantly flip-flopping between features and impossible to keep track despite clearly laying out priorities for them. I've tried to promote the concept of fixed teams that work on subsets of features, so keeping groups of people together, working on one feature, then moving to the next as a group, giving accountability and ownership to the teams and individuals in fixed areas instead of the musical chairs. However, the teams love the existing approach, don't see how it could ever work differently, and can't see why I'm baffled. Despite them failing every delivery and being on average 300% over estimates, we have new company leadership who are pushing for efficiency and reduced missed deadlines. The other PM came from a different project at the same company, but commented that this is worse because there's way more features. They mentioned managing 3 at maximum simultaneously previously, but have no suggestions on how to handle this at scale. Has anyone else seen a mad setup like this? It can't just be me that thinks this is wild. Please talk some sense into me. All right. So again, super really interesting one here, and I feel for this PM. This is a really tough spot. This is a really tough spot to step into, and you feel like you're just kind of fighting a tidal wave essentially. So let's get into it. So the first problem that we heard was this team is consistently delivering late work and consistently over budget and over estimates. Why is that happening? Well, we know exactly why. It's because the team, the leadership has allowed for a culture where there is zero accountability. And so we have this team that is working in, essentially these 80 Slack chats for each feature, and they dance from one chat to the other, to the other, to the other. When the PM asks them for updates, they don't give updates. They say no updates. They don't update Jira. They're completely unaccountable for their work. The same work that they're delivering late and at 300% over the estimates that they gave originally. And so this is a leadership failure of epic proportions. I firmly believe that teams should be happy and that teams should be comfortable in their working conditions, but there still has to be some accountability, and there still has to be efficiency, and there still has to be work delivered in some semblance of on time and on budget. I mean, this sounds like nothing is being delivered on time or on budget. And ironically, leadership is complaining, "Oh, we want less work to be delivered on time, or excuse me, less work to be delivered late, and we want more efficiency." Well, get real. I mean, really. I mean, just have to get real. I mean, this is all leadership failure of epic proportions. And for them to come back and say, "Oh, this is broken." I mean, of course it is. It's because you've allowed it to be broken. I mean, it's just complete. I mean, when I read that, I mean, my head nearly exploded. I mean, it's just outrageous. Problem two is the PM is unable to track progress efficiently. Well, I mean, of course, they can't track the progress. There's the root cause here is really that there's no process that mandates Jira updates. There's no process that mandates them updating the PM. They don't see any value in doing that. They're content to just work in isolation because they've been allowed to do it, because they're happy doing it, and that's again a leadership issue. This team has been allowed to work in an unaccountable way, and so they don't put anything in Jira. If you want something, try and fish it out of 80 Slack chats. I mean, it's just outrageous for this PM to have to spend all their time filtering through 80 different Slack chats, or it sounds like in this case like 26 different Slack chats for these features. It's just completely unreasonable. And then finally, the team is unwilling to consider other ways of working. Why is this? Well, they're basically weaponizing Agile as a shield. So they're saying, hey, we're working in an Agile way because we just adapt to things as they change in our Slack chats. That is just absolutely an outrageous way of thinking about it. There is nothing in and unfortunately, I mean, I believe we've talked about this in previous episodes. Is people tend to use Agile in kind of two extremes. Sometimes we have the extreme of, oh, you have to follow Scrum to the letter, and every single event has to be run exactly the way the Scrum guide says. And then you have the other camp that uses Agile, and this camp for this team uses Agile as a way to justify just doing whatever they want. That's exactly what's happening here. And the other thing that I think is happening here, and this is speculation on my part, but I think this team has some kind of like PTSD from being in the opposite extreme that I just mentioned, which is they were working in a system where they did all the Scrum events, and the Scrum events were sacred and they had to be run just so, which again is not the way the Scrum guide says that they should be run. Just to be very clear about that, it says it in the first page of the Scrum guide. But I think there's a really good chance that's what's happening here, because they said, hey, we don't want stand-ups, we don't want this, and we don't want that. And I think when you look at it, some of these Scrum implementations, I mean, they can be 10, 12 plus hours a week of just events, just meetings. And I think that's where this is coming from. So now they've gone from one extreme where they were essentially traumatized, now to this other extreme where they're off in fantasy land and nobody knows what they're doing. That's my opinion. So how do we fix it? So the first thing I would do in this PM's position is I would come back to the team again, but this time I would do it with hard data showing the delays and exactly what's happening. Right. So we heard 300% over estimates. We heard every feature is late. Get that on paper and show it to them. Share your screen with a spreadsheet. Okay, feature one estimated 5 days, actual time 11 days, delay 6 days, whatever it is. Okay, that all needs to be clearly documented and shown in a spreadsheet, and put those delays in red, and let them see the data. It's hard to dispute data, right? I mean, they can say, oh, we don't like it, but you have to show them the data. And you can even leverage what the hypocritical comment management made about, okay, well, we need to be more efficient and we want less delays. The other thing that I would do with that is having some really clear process suggestions for at least some Scrum events to be reincorporated into the process. I think there's a lot of people who have different opinions on stand-ups. I in this situation, I would be fully in favor of a stand-up. I think it's necessary. So for me, that's step one, and at the minimum, that's going to save this PM from having to do this phishing in Slack every day. I mean, it just seems like a very obvious thing. And eventually maybe you can build up to doing some other Scrum events that would help. But again, evaluate what's going to help. The team, going back to that extreme that maybe they were at before with every single event, that's not going to fly. But try and see, okay, well, I think this would fit, I think that would fit, and start there. The other thing is Jira. I think you have to mandate that Jira gets updated. That's the only way that this is going to work, is mandating that Jira gets used, and that can't come from the PM. That has to come from leadership. I think, again, it would be great if the PM could do it. It sounds like they've tried and that hasn't worked. So I think that has to go to leadership, but try it. Try it in this meeting, is approaching the team, show them all this information, make your suggestions and get feedback, and make it collaborative and see how it goes. See if they're open to these things. And I think coming in, hard line is not the right approach here, but collaboratively, you know, the, after presenting the data, I think they'll be more open to hearing these suggestions for improvement. Then let's say you have that meeting and the team is still unwilling to hear of these improvements. Then I would escalate to management. Um, I think for me, I could count on one hand the number of times that I've had to involve management over my 16 years of doing this. And I don't really believe in it. I really think that everything can be handled, or almost everything can be handled um, at my level. But in this case, it sounds like there's a lot of resistance. If you present it in a very factual way and there's still resistance, then I think an escalation is warranted. And it really should be a pretty easy escalation, to be honest, because the management has said, hey, we want less delays, we want more efficiency. So it shouldn't be a particularly difficult escalation if it comes to that. But obviously, can ingratiate yourself a lot more to the team if you don't have to get to that point. And then finally, is the ideal scenario is getting to a point where the team is accountable to each other and their stakeholders or clients, whatever the case might be. And that's really fostering that environment. And it sounds like, right now that's not happening. And it sounds like the PM has tried and they've gotten a lot of pushback. Like I said, this PM is in a really, really tough spot. So I can't really put any of this at their doorstep. But that's the goal, right? The goal is that this team is accountable to the organization, to the stakeholders in the organization or external clients. But I'm guessing these are internal projects based on the fact that it's been acceptable to deliver all this stuff just so late and so over budget. But they need to be accountable to the organization and the stakeholders within it, and that's where I think you want to get to, and you can do that with a lot of the things that we're talking about previously. All right, so that is agile dysfunction. Let's get into to case number 3, which is the phantom artifact pain. All right, spent hours building a beautiful Gantt chart, color coded, dependencies mapped, milestones highlighted, a work of art. Shared it with the team, radio silence. Ran a 30-minute meeting walking through it. Half the team had their cameras off. One person asked a question that was clearly answered on slide 3. I'm not mad, I'm just tired. Project is still moving forward somehow. Maybe the chart is just for me. So, again, this is another interesting one, albeit not as complex as the other two that we looked at. So let's look at the problem. So the first problem is the PM is frustrated because the team was not responsive to the Gantt chart email. And why is this happening? Well, the team doesn't care about a Gantt chart. Most teams don't care. So what is this helping them with? How is this using their time effectively? How is this making their work easier? It's not. So they don't care. So they're not going to respond. So they just simply don't care. It doesn't help them. This isn't an artifact that is intended to be helpful for teams. It's an artifact that is intended to be helpful for management and leadership so they can see the plan for the project at a high level without having to go into Jira or whatever you're using to see the sprints. It's really that simple. They just don't care. Second is the team was disengaged at the Gantt chart meeting. Well, again, part of it is because it's completely irrelevant to them. The second, for me, is this PM is just really misguided in believing that the Gantt chart offers some benefit to the team. If this PM is looking for some type of buy-in or validation, have a brief discussion with the tech lead and tell them, hey, this is what I'm planning. Do you see anything off the wall here? That's it. I've done that before. I've had this similar situation, but I've never emailed the Gantt chart to the team. I've never had a team meeting on it. I have said to the team lead, hey, this is where I'm at. This is based on what we discussed. Can you take 5 minutes? That's it, and that's done over Slack. Honestly, 5 minutes. But to haul, a whole team into a meeting and then have a slide deck on top of it of this Gantt chart of something they already don't care about, and make it even drier with a slide deck. I mean, it's not hard to understand why they're turning off their cameras and they're not involved in the meeting. They don't care. This doesn't help them. It's a really poor use of their time, to haul them into a meeting for this thing. I mean, just a really poor use of time. So that's why they're demonstrating the attitude that they are. That's why they're disengaged. And then the third problem is that the PM believes that the Gantt buy-in impacts success, and we heard that, some doubts of that at the end of, well, the project is still moving forward, so maybe it's just for me. Where is that attitude coming from? Well, this is something that the PM finds important. The Gantt is important to them. It could be because they were asked to do it by leadership, more than likely. In which case, this is a PM thing. This is a PM and leadership thing. This isn't a team thing. So it's not important to the team. It's important to the PM. They don't need to involve the team other than the case that I mentioned where maybe you run it past the tech lead. I mean, it's just, and again, this should all be like information that's known. This should all be information that has been discussed with the team before in some way, shape, or form, as far as, hey, high level, this is what we're planning to do as far as features for this project. That's it. Again, it's just, what's important to the PM isn't going to necessarily be important to the team. All right, so how do we fix this? So the first one is pretty obvious: is sharing artifacts only with appropriate stakeholders. Gantt charts go to leadership; they don't go to the team. So that's pretty straightforward. Second is only holding meetings that will benefit the team and respect their time. So we touched on this a little bit, right? Is hauling them into a meeting and then taking a Gantt chart that they already don't care about, compounding it with a boring PowerPoint, and it's a waste of their time. So that's why they're turning their cameras off. They have work to do. They're not interested in hearing you ramble about the Gantt chart for 30 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever it was. Just don't. It's just not relevant to their work. So they're going to turn their camera off. And they're going to multitask, and they're going to do their tasks. And again, we're holding a meeting that doesn't benefit them and doesn't respect their time. For me, it's like, this sounds maybe minor, but it's the kind of thing that really fractures trust. And really the team starts feeling, oh, here we go again. The next time a meeting invite comes, here we go. Is this going to be a bad use of my time? And it really is just setting the stage for that kind of attitude. So we really need to be careful about what we are using the team's time for. Our role is to protect their time. In this case, we're not protecting their time; we're wasting it. Third, gain a better understanding of what impacts project success. It's definitely not Gantt charts, right? So having a team that works well, having a team that is productive, having a team that trusts you, those are all things that will impact project success, not a Gantt chart. So again, just a very misguided way of thinking, to think that, I spent so much time on a Gantt chart and the team didn't care. Well, they don't care. They shouldn't care. Just unfortunately, just really misguided line of thinking here. All right, so what did we learn today? We covered a ton. It was really, first two cases were, like I said, just super interesting. So let's try and extract, like, what can we learn from it. So in the first case, there you could probably name 10 things that we learned from that Misdiagnosed Authority case. But for me, what I learned there is that everything is just such a delicate balance when you join a project midstream or you join an established organization, and you have to tread somewhat carefully. You can't come in with the gold hammer day one and just start laying down the law. You need to build trust. You need to understand how things are working. You need to see how it's working. You need to talk to people. You need to build rapport with people. You need to build relationships. Then you can start gradually implementing change. But, here the focus should be on the work, right? And the focus was not on the work. The focus was on all the other stuff that really doesn't matter that much, right? It's, oh, well, I should be in control, but these two developers are in control. Who cares? You have 7 weeks left to get the project done. Why aren't we focused on that? Right. And so, it's that for me is what I take from it, is just that constant reminder of, hey, there's a delicate balance here. And, if there's only 7 weeks left, do I really want to come in and upset the apple cart? The answer for me is no. I want to adjust it gradually. And some people would disagree. Some people would think, yeah, you only have 7 weeks, or maybe when they came on, you had to, what would it have been? It would have been 11 weeks. Um, to me, I don't think just tearing everything up and saying everything they're doing is terrible is the way to go. I think it's got to be collaborative, and it's got to be more gradual, with the focus on getting the work done in the limited time that you have. What did I take from case two? The agile dysfunction for me. What I take from that is that leadership is just so important. And there are times where as PMs we can be leaders, and we can demonstrate leadership to people by how we work and how we interact with them, and that we care about them and that we care about the project. But at the end of the day, if we're in a situation where there is a certain culture, that culture can be really hard to penetrate and break down, to make it productive. And that this is a prime example of that. It's a prime example of a culture that has existed for 6 years, and one person without any authority isn't going to be able to fix that. Are there things that PM could have done better? I don't know. It's hard to tell from that post. But you know, they're in an absolutely brutal situation, in my opinion, where they really just are. They're doing the best that they can in that situation by trying to scrap together, 80 different Slack chats. But again, leadership is just so critical in setting the culture. And there are people who say, "Oh, leadership." I had a debate with someone, I guess about a year ago, and where I said leadership flows from the top. The person said, "No, leadership flows from the bottom." I don't agree with that. I think this is a prime example of it flows from the top. This leadership said, "Hey, you guys were traumatized by the way you were doing things before. Now we're gonna do it the other way, and now we have this situation where we don't get our work done." It's not to say the other way was right, because it sounds like it probably wasn't. But there is a medium ground. You don't have to go from the absolute extreme of agile dogmatism or scrum dogmatism to agile cowboyism, and that's what we've done here. So, um, case three. What can we take from this? Well, I touched on a bunch of it. I think for me, it's just realizing that every misstep is one where we fracture our relationship with the team. And it might seem minor. Hey, I sent an email with a Gantt chart, and that in and of itself would be nothing. But it's the meeting. It's the meeting. It's the slide deck to just kind of drag them through this Gantt chart that doesn't impact them. And so that's just one small crack in the foundation that we're laying with our teams. That's just so important. It's just so critical that we build this trust and we build this relationship, and things like that. They slightly erode that trust and that relationship. So it's just so important. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to, and we talked about it really with the first case too, is just how fragile these relationships are, and we can't do things that fracture them. Are mistakes going to happen? Absolutely, but we have to be mindful about what we're doing. If you don't hear back, I think the team sent a perfectly good signal the first time. Hey, crickets to the Gantt chart. We don't want to hear about it. But this PM didn't receive the signal. So, all right. So I really appreciate you listening. If you're interested in sending me any feedback, we have email set up. It's pmor@illyriansolutions.com. It's in the notes in the description as well. If you have anything to add, if you like the show, don't like the show, any feedback, I'd be more than happy to hear. If you just want to say hi, feel free to send that my way. I'd be happy to hear any of that. But thank you again for listening, and I hope you have a great day.